when it comes to working with buyer's agents, you ultimately choose who you work with and, in effect, choose who gets paid. Only work with the ones that get it. You know, Richard, as much of an anomaly as he may seem to you, is not. There's an agent in your midst who is every bit as sharp as he is, or sharper. It's the ones that don't get it that will really eat you alive. They'll waste your time, and they will possibly discourage you. Did you find Richard the least bit discouraging? Do you find Robert the least bit discouraging? So, there's a great indication. If you're talking to a realtor and your stomach starts going, and you get a slight feeling of discouragement, you know that's someone you don't want to work with. Let that be the litmus test. It's not so tough. Foreclosure specialists like Richard, they advertise in the Harmon Homes, the Free Real Estate, the Century 21, the whatever, Keller Williams. They're in those books, and they are saying in their ads, foreclosure, 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 foreclosure. You know that's what they focus on. They're the specialists. Buyer agency agreements. There's a good chance that when you talk to a realtor, they're going to say, okay, looking forward to working with you. In order for me to be willing to do that, though, I'm just going to need you to sign this buyer agency agreement. Normally, that's not a problem at all. And in fact, in a lot of cases, the buyer agent there'll actually be disclosure language on the realtor's contract right at the end of it. Although some of them want to have a separate buyer agency agreement. Not a problem in principle. However, I suggest you read the buyer agency agreement because some of them say that you agree to work with that one agent exclusively and no other agent, period. And in fact, if you buy a house and that agent's not involved, they are still entitled to a commission. In fact, some of them say if you make an offer on a house, they're entitled to a commission. So there are some buyer agency agreements that are egregious, to say the least. My biggest concern is them limiting me from working with any other agents. And now here's why, and this should make sense to you. This is why the language is in that agreement. There's an old saying in the real estate business that goes like this: nobody owns the buyer. See, when Robert has an exclusive right to sell with one of his banks or asset managers, no one else is going to make a commission on that house, a listing commission on that house, as long as it sells during his listing agreement. In other words, he's been given the exclusive right and will absolutely be the one to get paid when that house gets sold. Now, there may be another agent involved too. The saying nobody owns the buyer it comes from this. Let's say that I'm an agent and Dave and I go out and we look at houses with Dave's wife and kids, and he expresses interest in a couple of them and says, well, let me get back to you, and then I never hear from him again. And a little later, I just happen to be poking around in the MLS, and I see that this house sold that I had showed to several buyers, and I go ahead and look a little further for the name of the buyer, and I'll be darned, it's Dave. I'm not getting paid on that. Some other buyer agent is getting paid on that. He went and met some other agent, and so he said, let me think about it. And in the meantime, maybe his wife said, hey, I talked to my girlfriend's sister who's an agent. We should go look at some houses with her. And the next thing you know, the time that I spent with him goes to waste. And that's not fair. That's not right. So the buyer agency agreements often have language in them to prevent him from doing that. So it might say, any house I show you today, if you buy it, I'm entitled to get paid. And that's reasonable. It might say you agree not to work with any other agent. And as an individual buyer who's looking for a home to live in, that's not horribly unreasonable. But as an investor, if the language says that I can't work with any other agent, that is horribly unreasonable. Because no one agent can do it all for you. Look, you live where you live. The area that you're going to be doing the business in might be encumbered by 2 or 3 different boards of realtors, 2 or 3 different MLS systems. And so I may have access to one and not to the other 2, and you want to be doing business over there. Well, it would be ridiculous for me to limit you from working with another agent if I don't even have access to that MLS because I'm not a member of that board and that board and that board, because that gets expensive. So as an investor, that is not a reasonable request. So we just simply strike it. And if the agent doesn't like that, well, then we're not going to be able to work with them. So, quick story. This is years ago. I was in Florida, and I had this agent who we met. I forget how we got together, but anyway, we talked about working together, and she said, okay, cool, let's do it. I know what you're looking for. I can help you here. This will be great. Obviously, you and I represent a repeat income opportunity to an agent as opposed to the owner-occupant buyer who's really a one-time deal, although maybe 7 to 10 years from now there's another commission that will come from him if we have a good relationship between now and then. But the reality is, as an investor, you're like cash flow to a realtor, okay? So she puts this agreement in front of me. It says that I agree not to work with any other agents, and I read the agreement, which is a good idea, guys. And I said, gee, this language right here really isn't going to work for me because I'm an investor, and I can't limit myself to just one agent, any one agent, let alone you or anyone else. It's just wouldn't be prudent. And so she said, well, I'm afraid if you're not willing to sign this agreement without changes, I'm not going to be willing to work with you. And I said, all right, well, I'll tell you what. I got an idea. And I sort of hunched over the agreement, and I didn't let her see. And I wrote right below the part that says, buyer agrees not to work with any other agents. I wrote right under that, agent agrees not to work with any other buyers. Seemed reasonable to me. And I pushed it in front of her, and she read it, and she did not laugh. And we didn't work together. Guys, some agents just don't get it. Look, any agent who understands why that language is in the exclusive buyer agency agreement is going to understand why you can't agree to it. If they don't understand why it's in there, they might not agree. And if they don't understand why that's in there, I'm not sure that you want to be working with them, because they might know less about the business than you. Although that isn't altogether uncommon. Focus on the oldest listings first. Got 200-300 DOM. What's DOM stand for? There's where we want to go when we're working with buyer agents who are in the MLS for us. The oldest listings first, the ones with the greatest amount of aging. I like dust on them. And you know what? Here's what happens when you do that. You end up going in and being the one to get the deal where someone else had made the offer before. Remember yesterday we were saying, don't let them get that deal. That's your deal. Well, now you're going to go in and get that deal because the other buyers don't follow up. I'm here to tell you right now, if you want to separate yourself from the business, from your competition, better than any other way, follow up. I would give you a rough guesstimate that over the years, somewhere around 60%, more than half of the deals that I have done have come from sellers that originally told me no. And where I wasn't willing to take no for an answer and where I followed up. Every time you follow up with a seller, you make yourself more professional and more like you care. And that's true even with banks. But it's especially true with individual sellers. So we're going to rely on these buyer agents for everything relating to the MLS, comps, tax maps, market data, etc. I have a couple agents that I work with that, as buyer agents who, whenever I need anything, I just pick up the phone or send an email. Richard was talking about how he can put, any realtor can do this, can put you on an automatic feed or whatever they call it, where you get email updates when a property meets your criteria, goes into the system. I've got all kinds of those updates coming all the time. In fact, get this, I've got an agent that I've been working with for a long time. In fact, he's the listing agent on this piece of land that I'm going to sell. I've done a bunch of deals with him, a bunch. Good guy, and he's a friend, really. I had a bunch of buyers that came into my buyer website. I run ads and I'm driving buyers there, and they had houses that they weren't what I wanted. They wanted too much, or they weren't where I wanted to buy. And so just out of the blue, I copied and pasted them into a little spreadsheet, and I sent them over to my friend John and Linda. I said, hey, here's some buyers I attracted with my website. I can't do anything with them, so I thought you might like them. Now they want to do listings. So I send them a bunch of, did I say buyers? Have I been saying buyers the whole time? Okay, I totally screwed that up. I haven't had my coffee yet, I guess. I don't drink coffee. That's a problem. Sellers, sorry. I'm running ads. I'm driving sellers to the new seller website. I've got sellers who I don't want to buy their houses from because they're asking too much, or they're in areas I don't want to buy. I copied and pasted them, sent them to my friends John and Linda. They're a husband and wife team. And I said, hey, these are sellers that I really can't do anything with. I thought perhaps you might like to know that they're needing to sell their houses. Do you think an agent who likes to do listings would like to have those leads? Yeah. So I didn't ask for anything in return. I just sent them. Week later, I get a list from John and Linda. Here's a list of people who are in foreclosure, but where NOD hasn't been filed yet. We know this because we've been doing bank BPOs. They send us out to do the BPO after the first or second late. NOD hasn't even been filed yet. We thought you might like to have these. Oh, boy.